Hey, this Christmas party is getting a little too quiet. I think it's time we liven it up with my favorite Christmas gift, Mr. Microphone.
Hey, what's that?
Well, you set the dial on your FM radio and testing.
I'm on the radio!
These kids are having a fabulous time with Mr. Microphone, the cordless microphone that actually puts your voice on the radio. There are no attaching wires, so you're free to move around. Broadcast over any FM car radio.
Hey, good looking. We'll be back to pick you up later.
Hey, I'm on the Mat Lab. Oh, hi. Welcome to DAQ Lab number 4, Dynamic Measurements. Today we'll be using the microphone to record our voices. We'll be speaking into the microphone, which will vibrate a diaphragm and create a voltage, which we'll record with our DAQ devices in MATLAB. And then we'll be looking at the frequency with CEFFT and then doing some processing. Microphones are located in these black boxes. So open up the box, we see that we have our microphone here, the on-off switch, and the microphone cable connected here. We match up the 3 pins. And then at the end of our microphone cable, we have a positive and negative wires that will go to our DAQ device. So we get our screwdriver out of our box and just hook up red to positive and black to negative. Turn our microphone on and we're ready. Now I'm going to record a low frequency sound that I make with my voice using DAQ MATLAB. So we'll say low voice and time as our output files. Call the function DAQ MATLAB. And the first thing we want to do is give it our sampling frequency, which is 14,400. Specify our duration, which in this case we'll use 5 seconds. And then give it our voltage range to record over. And since the microphones output a very small voltage, we'll use our smallest voltage range, which is 1.25 volts. And we'll want to suppress this information because we'll spit out a lot of data. Started. Oh. And so if we look at the output that MATLAB gives us, we can see that I was silent for about 1.5 seconds here. And there's a lot of noise actually in the signal. And then you can see the amplitude of the signal increases a lot where I was giving my low frequency voice. And then I cut off again right before the end. We see the noise again. So we can actually play this sound back in MATLAB and we can hopefully get a listen to what the noise sounds like. So to do that we say sound and then we want to give it our data file, which in this case is low voice. And then we have to tell it our sampling frequency, which was 14,400. And we can't really hear it that well because, again, the output of the microphone is very small. So we're going to actually amplify the signal by typing low voice, and we'll multiply it by 10 to make it 10 times louder. And again, our sampling frequency. Now that we've recorded our signal, we want to take a look at the frequency response. So we use CEFFT to get a look at the frequency domain of the signal. So we start off, we call CEFFT by stating our output, which is frequency and amplitude of the signal, and our function name, which is CEFFT, and we give it our data file, which in this case is low voice, and our sampling frequency is 14,400. And we take a look at our plot of frequency on the x-axis and amplitude on the y-axis. We see we got a lot of peaks down here below 1,000 hertz. So I'm going to take the magnifying glass and zoom in on those frequencies. And we see we have very regular patterns of high amplitude frequencies here with my low-pitched voice. The highest being at somewhere between 400 and 600. So if I take my data cursor and find the max, I see that it's about 497 hertz. And if I look at some of these other peaks, the first peak we see is 124, about 125. The second peak is about 250. The next peak is about 375. and this peak is about 500. So we're actually seeing harmonics here spaced by about 125 hertz. We can use the knowledge of the frequency domain of our signal to go ahead and remove the noise that we initially heard in the signal. So from what we've seen here, the dominant frequencies in my low voice happen before about 600 hertz. So we're going to use a program called Badger Filter to filter out any frequencies that are higher than 600 hertz, leaving only these dominant frequencies. So we go back into MATLAB and let's take a look at what Badger Filter wants from us so that we can make it work. So we type in help Badger Filter and we see that it's a function that outputs something called data filt, and we call Badger Filter, and we see it has a couple inputs. We need to give it our data, we need to give it the sampling frequency, we need to tell it what type of filter we want it to perform, and then our cutoff frequencies for that filter. So a little bit more into the inputs. Data, again, would be, in this case, low voice. Sampling frequency, we know. Filter type's a little bit new. So we have 4 different choices. We have, first, a low-pass filter, which will allow everything below a certain frequency to remain in the signal. We have a high-pass frequency filter, which will let all frequencies above a certain threshold remain. And we have a bandpass filter, which we can specify a certain range of frequencies to keep, and a band stop filter, which we can specify a certain range of frequencies to get rid of. In this case, since we saw that all our good frequencies were below 600 hertz, we're going to use a low-pass filter and let all frequencies below 600 hertz pass. And the final input we see is F cutoff, and that's our cutoff frequency of our filter. So in this case, we're going to use 600 hertz as our cutoff frequency. And then finally, our output signal is just data filt. So we start by typing data filt for our output signal, function Badger Filter, and then our signal name, which is low voice, sampling frequency 14,400, filter type is low, and our cutoff frequency is 600. We run that program and filter out the data, and we can quick run the sound of data filtered. So we type in data filt and our sampling frequency of 14,400, and we'll listen to see if it's cleaned up any. And so remember, we do have to amplify our signal because we didn't really hear a whole lot. It's very soft. So I multiply the signal by 10. And now we really didn't hear any noise in the playback. So we successfully filtered our signal. To further verify that our low-pass filter worked, let's take a look at the frequency domain of the signal. So we're going to call CEFFT. So frequency amplitude equals CEFFT, and we're going to look at our filtered signal called data filt and our sampling frequency again. And now we have an FFT plot of the frequency domain. We see that here we have our dominant frequencies, and most everything above those are cut off. And if we take a little bit closer look, we see that things tend to go to 0. Our cutoff frequency was 600. And by about 800, everything's gone. So we've successfully isolated everything below 600 with our low-pass filter. Now I'd like to play a song from 2 different recordings. The first recording I have is called Beat Filt, so I'll play that for you now. That's been bandpass filtered to get rid of the noise. And the second sound I'd like to play for you is called Wiki Filt. So what I'm going to do now is add the 2 sounds together to make a song. So my new variable is called song, and that just includes beat filt plus wiki filt. And since wiki filt was a little bit softer than beat filt, I'm going to go ahead and amplify wiki filt by 2 to bring the noise levels to be pretty equal to each other. So now I have the variable called song that comprises those two different sound recordings. And I'd like to play it back, so I say sound, song, and I'll amplify it by 10 in general, and my recording frequency, 14,400. So now I have the two sounds overlaid over each other. If I want to extend my song and play it multiple times, I can just make a new variable called song extend and just keep piling up song next to each other. Song, 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 and then again play song extended, song extend. And we hear that the song keeps playing over and over again, 3 times. In general, all dynamic measurements have some sort of noise associated with them. And we need to use tools like the FFT and filtering to condition our signal to remove that noise and get out what we really want from our recording. In this lab, we'll be using microphones to look at dynamic signals. We'll be trying to figure out what our voice range is, and we'll try to record fat beat using FFT and filtering to condition our signal and make a good song. And just remember that if you record something that has a lot of different frequencies, such as my voice, you're going to need to speak really loud into the microphone so that you get your desired signal much higher than your noise in the signal. Such as, "Hey, good looking, we'll be back to pick you up later."